10-3 is all about data distribution. So we're going to focus on the measures of central tendency. And by the end of the lesson today, I want you to be able to describe the central tendency of a data set and also create a box and whisker plot. To start, I actually put part of the lesson in the warm-up. I want you to find the mean, median, mode, and range of the Steelers' points from the first part of the 2012 season. So I have the points that they scored listed right here. You probably remember how to find the mean, median, mode, and range. I want you to do that now. Make sure you show your work, and if you don't remember one of them, it's okay, we're going to go over it. Please pause and do this, and then press play to see the answer. You are able to use a calculator here. Now that you've completed it, let's go over it. So hopefully these did sound familiar to you. Mean is always the average. So to find the mean, you're going to take the data set, all the values in the data set, and you're going to sum them together. I shortcutted my work a little bit. You might want to write them out. And then you can divide by however many data values there are. In this set, there's 12. So I take my sum, which was 254, and divide it by 12. My mean then comes out to be 21.16 repeating. Do not round unless they tell you to. To find the median, you need to first list the data values in order from least to greatest. So I did that down here. Then cross out one from each side until you get to the middle. Median's the middle. If there's only one term in the middle, that is your median, and there's nothing more to be done. If there's two terms in the middle, you find the average of the two. So here I would add 23 and 23 and divide by 2 to get my median. It's just going to be 23 though, because you're dividing by 2 and they're the same number. The mode then is the number that occurs the most. It has to occur more than the other data values. In this data set, you actually have 4 numbers that occur twice. Since there are numbers that occur less than that, all 4 are modes. If all the numbers in this data set did not repeat, they were all only showing up once, there would be no mode. If all the numbers in the data set showed up twice, there would be no mode, because no one digit is occurring more than the other digits. In this case, there's 4 numbers that occur more than some of the data values, so all 4 are modes. If I added one more number to this data set, if I added 27 again, that would of course change the median and the mean. That would make 27 the only mode number, because now 27 would occur 3 times, which is more than any of the other ones. So know that it's only the one that occurs the most, not all the numbers that occur more than once. Sometimes I see that mistake. And the last part is the range. The range is always going to be the highest number minus the smallest number in your data set. So I would have 31 and 10 being subtracted. My range is 21. Hopefully this looks familiar to you. Hopefully your answers are correct. If not, correct them and ask any questions that you need to your classroom teacher. So we should know these measures of central tendency. We've been doing them for a while. The mean is the sum of the values in the set divided by the number of values in the set. Mean is the average. The median is the middle value, when the values are in numerical order, or the mean of the 2 middle values if they're an even number. And we did that on the warm-up. And the last one, the mode, is the value or values that occur most often. There may be one, there may be more than one, like we saw in the warm-up, or like we talked about, there may be no mode. The range is always going to be the difference between the least and greatest value The only thing we didn't talk about in the warm-up then was the word outlier. And the outlier, you need to write this down, is a value that is very different from the other values in the set. I'm going to tell you how to calculate an outlier officially from the algebra book, but we really don't actually, we are not going to focus this year in our algebra class on calculating those, okay? But an outlier is very different from the other values. And I give you an example of how this can affect your mean. If you have most of your data values down around here, you know, in that warm-up, most of the points were around 10s, 20s, 30s. And then you have one number that's really different, whether it's way smaller or way larger. So maybe in one game, somehow the Steelers scored 75 points. That would be considered an outlier, and that would affect the mean a lot. What that would do to your mean is it would pull it up so that it was kind of away from most of the data. And that can be a little misleading in some cases, and you want to make sure you understand that that can happen. So most often when we choose to represent the average or the measure of central tendency, we think the mean is the best. But some cases, if there's an outlier, you may want to choose the median to represent that data best, because the mean would be greatly affected by an outlier, whereas the median wouldn't be as affected. So we're going to look at an example of that, but keep that in mind. Let's look at example 1 then. We'll practice this a little bit more, choosing a measure of central tendency. So the number of fish sold monthly at Aqua World was 55, 67, 73, 74, 75, and 80. Find the mean, find the median, and find the mode for me. So mean, you're finding the average, so you're going to add them all up. Go ahead and do that on your calculator, and make sure you write down your work. Your teacher is going to want to see the work. And then you divide it by the number of values that there are. So there's 6 values. Do that work for yourself. For the median, we need them to be in order from least to greatest. When you look at this data set, it's actually already in order for you. So you got a little bit of your work done. So just find the middle value, and then the mode's going to be the one that occurs the most. So hopefully I gave you enough time to find the mean. You add them up, divide by 6. I found it to be 70 and 7/10. The median, I would cross them out lightly. Don't scribble them out all the way, because that's where mistakes happen. The median would be the average of these two numbers. So you can do this division, or you can just think, what's directly in between those two? The average is going to come out to 73.5. And the mode's the number that occurs the most. All of these data values only occur once, so there is no mode. Don't write 0, because if you write the number 0, I might think the mode is the number 0. So you actually have to write no mode. None of these occur more than the others, so there's no mode. So for this data set, which value gives the average of the number of fish sold? The average, like we said, is always the mean. So the mean here would be 70 and 7/10. Which measure of central tendency best describes the number of fish sold, and explain why you think that? A lot of people might still stick with the mean as the best description, but my problem with this mean is that when we look at this, 70.7, that would lie like right in here. And there were 4 values that occurred more than that. So only 2 occurred less than that. That might not be the best to really represent this data. When you look at the number of fish sold, most months they sell more than 70, right? They had 4 months where they sold more than 70. Maybe 55 is a little bit of an outlier. It might be pulling that mean down. Whereas when we look at the median's right in here. It's in the middle of the 70s, and there's 3 values that are very, very close to that. That might be a better representation of the number of fish sold at Aqua World in this case. So in this case, I might say the median is the best. In this case, because it is really close to 3 of the data values, and most months had around 73.5 fish sold. So you want to definitely keep an eye on whether the mean or median might be a better representation, depending on what you're trying to get across and what you're trying to accomplish with it. All right, measures of central tendency describe how the data tends towards one value. You may also need to know how data is spread out across several values. And we can think about how our data is spread out by thinking about the quartiles. Quartiles divides a data set into 4 equal parts. And what I mean by equal parts is that there's going to be the same number of data values in each part of this. That's why it's a quartile. Think of quarter, quart, that's going to be like 4. So each quartile contains 25% of the values in the set, or 1/4 of the set of the values. Okay, so when you think about all the data values, if you have 10 values, break that in half, there'd be 5 on each half. Break that in half, there'd be about 2.5 within each quarter, right? We're going to use this idea to create a box and whisker. To find the first and third quartile, you're going to first find the median of each half of the data. You're going to first find the median, and then you're going to find the median of each half of the data. When there is an odd number of values, the median is not used to find the upper and lower quartiles, and we will do an example of this. The interquartile range, and you might see this as IQR. We have seen questions like this on the PSSAs and the Keystones, so you're going to want to remember IQR is interquartile range. All that is the difference between quartile 1 and quartile 3. This part is just extra. It's in your textbook. You can kind of check it out for some more information, but we're not going to do it, we're not going to really focus on it, and that's not a required step for 8th grade. But to determine if a number is an outlier, it would be any value that is 1.5, that 1.5 would always stay, times the interquartile range, and you would subtract that from the first quartile, and you would add that to the third quartile. It's any value that is 1.5 times the interquartile range, less than the first quartile, or 1.5 times the interquartile range, greater than the third quartile. Any number outside of that would be an outlier, okay? So you don't actually have to officially check for outliers this year, but I just wanted to show you that there is a formula that you could use. I'm going to stop this video here. We're going to start the next one with box and whisker.